that has faced us with virtual learning and things of that nature. And so hopefully some of the information that you will learn and gather tonight will help better prepare not only our students, our young people, but also our educators and community partners who are educated to provide quality education for the future Baltimorean leaders. And so thank you so much for the opportunity. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague in the House, the chair of the Baltimore City House Delegation, Delegate Stephanie Smith.
Thank you so much, Senator. I just want to remind folks, if you're not speaking, to please put your things on mute, so it'll be easier for all of our listeners to hear. I will belabor the point because we have a jam-packed agenda with a lot of really important speakers that people in Baltimore need to hear from. But I want to say that as a proud Baltimore City public school parent, my son will be a rising first grader. I'm here to give you the information that will be shared. And I also want to say I'm really excited to take advantage of the Summer Arts and Learning camp that was provided by Young Audiences. I think it helped to maintain some momentum around virtual learning that I think will be productive going into this fall. But again, if you are not on mute, I highly encourage you to get acquainted with that button very quickly so that we'll be able to have a productive rest of this evening. So again, at this point, I would like to introduce my colleague and friend and birthday twin, Senator Mary Washington.
This is Chair, and thanks to Hayes and so beautiful to see my colleagues in the House. Consistent with what you said. I think I got it. I muted myself. Okay, great. I said a whole bunch of wonderful things about all of you. I won't repeat it. Just as you were saying, we're doing this what it would be like if we were having our committee hearings and a committee briefing. And, the Education, Health, and the Environment, and so de facto, or because of that, chair of our Education Subcommittee, and my colleague, enjoyed House is committee on the House side, and so this is just brief. All of us will have some questions. We're assuming that there may be an opportunity to provide questions as well, but issues around issues around divide. There's so many things that I know all of us want to. So I will have to coach
I'm so sorry, Senator, but I'm having grave difficulty understanding you. I think we have someone that's struggling to keep muting them and then they unmute themselves. But
I don't talk anymore. I'm going to pass it off to.
Yeah, I apologize. I think it'd be a great time for Delegate Brooke Learman to step in.
Yep.
Right now and mute yourself. That would be great. There's a lot of feedback from somebody. Great. Thank you. Great. Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. Really excited to be here. Today is the first day, official start day of school for staff and teachers. And so it's been exciting to see a lot of posts on Facebook and Twitter from some of our amazing teachers and personnel going back for what will be a very different school year this year. But we know that they are up for it. And so this afternoon, we're really excited to hear from our school leaders, from our board chair, from Dr. Stanilesis, from President Brown, President Giddings, and also from Tisha Edwards in the mayor's office on some of the work that they're doing to support our young people. This is really a time like no other. We have never had a school year start quite like this. And I hope that we never do again, frankly. A lot of us on the Baltimore City Delegation have kids in Baltimore City Public Schools. I have a rising second grader. And we've been following all the notices and everything that's going on and anxiously awaiting agendas and schedules for our kids as well. So we're excited, without further ado, to turn it over to our speakers. And just so everybody knows how this will work, we are going to, each speaker will have about 10 minutes, and then we'll have 30 minutes for question and answer from members of the House and Senate delegation. Members, if you could please type your questions in the chat box at any time. Senator Washington will be asking the questions of the senators. I'll pose questions from the House members, and we'll just go back and forth as if we were really in person and how it would actually work after the presentations. For those watching on Facebook Live, you may type questions as comments, on the video. We'll do our best to get to your questions as well. So thank you so much for tuning in, and also just a quick moment of gratitude for all the teachers, administrators, community school coordinators, and staff who've been so incredibly flexible and nimble over the past 6 months, really going above and beyond. So I'm gonna just tell you a little bit about who's gonna speak with us tonight and then turn it over to them. First, we're going to hear from Linda Chinia, the chair of the Board of School Commissioners. Dr. Chinia was appointed to the Board of Commissioners in 2014 and served as vice chair from July 2018 until she assumed the chairmanship. She's a graduate of City Schools, a former employee, having served as a teacher, principal, and in district leadership over a 38-year career. Dr. Sonia Santelises is the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, and she has spent close to 30 years focused on building high-quality teaching and learning to help students excel. She first came to City Schools as Chief Academic Officer, serving in that role from 2010 to 2013, and returned in July 2016 after 3 years as Vice President at the Education Trust. Great to have her here. Also delighted to welcome President Diamante Brown of the Baltimore Teachers Union. She was formerly an English teacher at Booker T. Washington Middle School, where she saw firsthand the impact that generational poverty, institutional racism, and pervasive crime have on Baltimore City's kids. She also saw how teachers aren't always given the necessary tools and resources to help them. And so she very recently, in fact, just in 2019, ran for and was elected as president of the Baltimore Teachers Union, where she represents Baltimore City teachers and school paraprofessionals. Welcome. Jimmy Giddings. Mr. Giddings is the president of the Public School Administrators and Supervisors Association. He began his career with Baltimore City Public Schools in '71 as a second grade teacher at City Springs Elementary School in District 46. So I love that fact. Welcome, Mr. Giddings, for joining us. And finally, Tisha Edwards. Tisha Edwards is the director of the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, and is, of course, also a leader in both K-12 and higher education with deep policy experience and advocacy roots. She has spent her entire career working on behalf of kids, as CEO of Bridge EDU, vice president of the DeCarlo Family Foundation, chief of staff and lead education and youth policy advisor to former administrators, and, of course, interim CEO as well. Really delighted to have all of you here to hear your perspectives and your thoughts and plans on reopening. Dr. Chinia, I'm going to turn it over to you to start. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Delegate Lehrman for inviting me here today to speak before the city delegation about the opening of schools from a school board member's perspective. And just let you know that I can't say enough about how much the board appreciates the partnership that we have with our delegation. I also want to acknowledge that this is a very special day for us. There was a ribbon cutting for a brand new 21st century school, Mary E. Rodman. And so this is truly an exciting day, as well as having our staff return. As many of you know and have probably experienced, we are in unprecedented times, and we are going to move forward with teaching our children, however, in the most productive and safe manner that we can. As many know, the governor has given local school districts the sole discretion of how to best bring students back to school. Because we do not and did not have statewide metrics to determine the criteria for the reopening of schools, the board tasked the CEO to work with national, state, local health officials, union members to survey staff of our students and our staff in city schools. Our board also approved a modification to the school calendar so that school could start September 8th, giving the CEO and her staff more time to prepare for the virtual reality that we are in today. We provided our reopening plan to the Maryland State Department of Education on August the 14th. It has also been published for the public to view. And as you know, we, like everyone else in the state, will begin classes virtually. We've given the CEO authority to purchase thousands of Chromebooks and accessories for students, as well as school-based staff. And as we continue to work with internet providers to offer free internet service and hotspots to students. And by the way, we also have been purchasing hotspots to try to provide for some of our students and their families. Please, as you are talking and within your districts, please remind families and let them know that if they are in need of a laptop, to please contact their schools, where we will continue to distribute them. We're also going to be providing laptops as we receive them from vendors. Our desire is that every school-age child in need of a laptop is eligible and should receive one within Baltimore City. Do need to let you know that all schools may not have them at the same time, because given this new time and the need for virtual learning across the nation, there are massive delays with suppliers, but as soon as they are available, they will be provided to schools. As we did this summer, we hope to have some in-person instruction for small groups of students that we know will not be well served by a virtual setting. And in fact, some of the lessons that we learned from the summer were used to help us to develop the reopening plan for this fall. We're also exploring food service options for students. We know that many of our families rely on the breakfast and the lunch that we serve during the school year. And so with partners like the City of Baltimore and other nonprofits, we hope to continue to bridge the food disparity that we have among our students and their families. The board and the CEO will be revisiting the virtual instruction model in mid-October. We will be looking at health data as well as the online instruction data to determine how to best proceed. But we understand that some families will not be comfortable sending their children into a school building. Therefore, no matter what we may decide in mid-October, there will always be a virtual component. We have been following CDC guidelines and those of our partners such as Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, and Morgan University for sanitizing our school buildings. And we've been inspecting air systems in buildings and bringing in air purifiers. In fact, one of the outcomes of some of that work has been to develop standardized operating procedures for our system. We're also working with partners such as the Department of Recreation and Parks to provide safe spaces for students during the day with adult supervision and support. These are students who really do need to have another place other than home to complete their virtual classes. We don't know what the future will hold, but we will provide the CEO with any tools that she needs to have a successful, albeit very different, school year. So again, I want to thank you for what you do and continue to do for our students, and hope that we can continue to collaborate and partner for the children of Baltimore City.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And we're going to turn it over to Dr. Santelises now.
Hi, thank you, Delegate Learman, and it's thank you to the entire city delegation for just your continued interest and advocacy on behalf of city schools, Baltimore City, its entirety, and most importantly, our families and students. I want to also thank Board Chair Chinya for her remarks, because that will enable me to focus in on some additional points as well and expound a bit. As Chair Chinya just described, and I think everybody is aware of as of now, that due to the virus's progression, city schools will open to students in a 100% virtual environment on September 8th. Teachers began their professional learning officially. Many of them, frankly, had begun that professional learning earlier in the summer. But with that, we will be implementing virtual learning experiences that really are designed to provide students with vigorous and engaging learning opportunities that continue to prepare them for the future. We know that everyone opening virtually is not ideal, but we really are committed to providing all students with devices, as Chair Chinya said, both laptops and hotspots if needed, so that they really can get maximum benefit from virtual learning this school year, really building on a lot of what we learned this past spring. As I noted earlier today, teachers and 10-month staff returned to work to participate in quality professional development, really to make sure that our educators, staff members really have the skills and tools that are necessary to effectively support our students in either a virtual or hybrid learning environment. As part of our commitment to support school readiness, any school-based staff member directly related to instruction who has need of a computer for instruction will be provided with one. We began some of that distribution on Monday, and it will be continuing. It is also we provide a daily synchronous, and by synchronous we mean live, learning environment for our students that will meet their needs. Recent studies project studies that are taking place nationally and frankly internationally. They project potentially significant learning loss when students receive even just average remote learning in the spring, and much larger losses when they receive low quality remote learning. We also know that the projected learning loss would probably be greater for low income, Black and Hispanic students. So our efforts this year and in preparing for this year are really to counter that prediction with our own work. And then also I will say, based on many students' experiences, and we even had some young people this week who shared their experiences about with remote learning in the spring, this fall we opted to provide more synchronous and live learning with teachers to help prevent this learning loss. We heard overwhelmingly from our families and our students that there was definitely a need, and frankly, they deserve as much live instruction as possible with teachers who know and care for them in order to connect early on with students and to provide in-depth supports in more structured learning environments. We will be throughout the fall continuing to survey our families and parents and our students on the quality of that learning experience, as well as continue to provide supports for our staff so that young people in a virtual model will get perhaps not all that they would receive in an in-person, but definitely far more than they received in the spring. With regards to small group in-person instruction, where the district is now is really planning for a return to some small group instruction later in this fall, provide an update on those next steps by mid-October, if not before. In the meantime, happy to report that the success of our small group in-person learning program this summer enabled us to assess the need to prioritize groups of students for in-person instruction as conditions allow, as Chair Chinya referenced, out of respect for our families. Again, we'll continue to have a virtual option. And really, in summary, what I'd like to just say, and I'm sure if there are questions about food distribution or other things later, happy to take those, but want to be respectful of the time period, because I know Delegate Learman will start giving me a signal if I go too long. So just want you to know that we really are committed to responding to what we heard from families and from students, young people themselves, about synchronous and live learning, those engaging relationships, taking time to establish the relationships, both within a daily setting as well as with family orientation over the next 2 weeks. And we will continue to assess the efficacy of that. We'll take feedback from teachers, some of our lead teachers and administrators in the district actually helped inform some of what you got a chance to see in our learning plan. But we also know that implementation in this kind of environment is going to require flexibility. And so we are committed to making whatever adjustments we need to accelerate student learning and wellness during this very challenging period. So I will turn it back over to you, Delegate Lehrman.
Great. Thank you so much. And gosh, you had 3 whole minutes left. So way to go.
I think that's the first for me. Normally,
yeah, I am keeping time. Yes. So thank you. I appreciate it. Now, delighted to turn it over to President Brown. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'll speak on behalf of the Baltimore Teachers Union. We have a couple of concerns that we wanted to express today. One of our concerns is that although there are safety protocols in the district's reopening plan, that some of them aren't being followed. For example, today I've had a member report that an administrator wasn't wearing a mask during an in-person PD. I've had a secretary report that although they're supposed to have plexiglass covering the front area of their desk, that there's rope and they asked for it to be properly reinstalled. And last time I spoke to them, that hadn't been accomplished yet. Also, when I spoke with the facilities department chief, I was told that this was last week. I was told that it would take about 6 weeks to professionally disinfect and clean the buildings. And right now, so that means that right now that we haven't completed that process. And one of the safety protocols is that we disinfect and clean the buildings. And the union has a couple of solutions to this challenge, which is one, we would like our board to approve a fully virtual start for the entire first semester. That way, more time can be allotted for making certain that the safety protocols can be implemented the way they need to be implemented to make people feel safe in buildings. Also, we're asking that there be no small groups in buildings for the entire first semester for those same reasons, and that the board negotiates with the union on what the safety protocols will look like, not just when we go back to a hybrid model, but as of now, because we have some of our members in the building now. And we believe that if the board works more effectively with the directly impacted and the frontline staff, that the safety protocols could be implemented much more effectively. We also want to make certain that all of our students and all of our educators will be provided the proper resources. Two of the basic resources we need is high-speed internet access and also district-issued devices. We don't want to use our personal devices to deliver virtual learning because there are a lot of privacy issues there. And also, We strongly believe that our boss should supply us the tools we need to do our job. And I hope it's apparent that we do need a device to execute online learning effectively. And during negotiations, during town halls, we've been told that if we need those devices, we will get them. However, during negotiations, we've been told if we need those devices, we'll get them if they're available. And we feel like that if they're available clause actually negates the whole statement that we'll get the devices if we need them. And so if the devices aren't available because there are money challenges that I'm very familiar with in Baltimore City and Baltimore City public schools specifically, we're asking that the board be transparent and publicly share them with advocates and our legislators and our other government officials, so that way we all understand how we can contribute and help with the shortfalls, because in order for us to pull off virtual learning successfully, all of our instructors are going to need a device, and all of our students are going to need a device. And also we're asking that our community members and our school board, our district leaders, our government officials be innovative in solutions, because we also understand that funding can sometimes be a long process. But, I've been in Baltimore for all my life, 38 years, and all 38 years, I've been told that funding is the issue. And so, after decades of hearing that, I would think that we would start to consider additional and alternative solutions, so that we don't just continue to come back to the challenge of limited funding being the stopping point for being able to give our students the schools they deserve. We're also concerned about the daily schedule. I'm a middle school teacher, and so I look most closely at the middle school schedule. It is 375 minutes of screen time. We think that's an excessive amount of time, and we also think that we put a proposal across the table that will offer more time in a day for family and student and individual support versus a full 375 minutes of live instruction. And we want to be able to offer our families and students more individual support during the school day, because a lot of our students told us that they needed that additional support and more one-on-one help during the school day. And so if all of the school day is filled with us just doing live instruction, well, not just doing live instruction, there are some spaces in the schedule that the district has put forth that does include some time for office hours and outreach to parents. However, it's not enough time. Also, we want to make certain that all of the work that needs to be done in a school day is done within the time that is allotted in our contract, which is 7 hours and 5 minutes. And already on the first day of school, we found that schedules have exceeded the 7 hours and 5 minutes. I do appreciate that when I reached out to district leadership, that the schedule was fixed immediately. However, instead of us being reactionary, we would like to be proactive, and we would like the board to reconsider negotiating with us on a daily schedule to make certain that we do have proper planning time and time for family support. And lastly, but definitely not the last of our concerns in its entirety, is that our secretaries and office assistants have been directed to go back into school buildings. They were directed to go back into school buildings on Monday, and almost everything that they are in the buildings to do, they can do remotely. And so we're asking the CEO to allow them to work remotely, because right now the buildings haven't been cleaned completely, and safety protocols are not being executed properly, and we don't have sufficient PPE. And all of that has led to our secretaries and office assistants not feeling comfortable with not feeling that the district is really minimizing the risk to the level that they would like. I know that sound, Brooke. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate the concerns that were raised, and look forward to discussing them now and in the future too. So thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to President Giddings. Thanks for joining us.
First, I'd like to thank Ms. Chinia, Board Chair, Dr. Santalese, and I know Ms. Edwards for the comments that they're going to make today and that I have previously made. I want them to know that I support their comments 100%. And Tisha, I know that I will support your comments 100% because you're like a baby sister to me. My comments are going to be very brief today. Dr. Santalese and Board Chair Ms. Chinia basically had said everything that I wanted to say, and I thank them very much for that. I think I need to emphasize to the city delegation, my first priorities are the safety of our children and our staff that I represent. My other priority is that our children receive the quality education that they deserve and they need to have right now. And it's going to be very difficult during this very devastating time that we're going through with this coronavirus going on. Our principals and assistant principals, central office staff have done everything humanly possible to ensure that our children and staff are being maintained in a safe environment. They're doing everything to ensure that our children are receiving the quality education that they are entitled to. Again, it is very difficult to do that in this devastating time that we are living in. The Baltimore City public school system is in I want to be careful about words. The Baltimore City school system is in a financial disaster. Let me put it that way. And the city delegation needs to look at the possibility of increasing funding for our students and staff and management, so certain things can be implemented again during this diverse time that we're going through. And I am, as I indicated, I'm going to be very brief. I think actions speak a lot louder than words. And I think the city delegation knows exactly how I feel about this. And I'm looking forward to the delegation assisting the Baltimore City school system in implementing what is going to be a very, very strange time for all of us. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, President Giddings. Really appreciate you being here this early evening with us. And now we're going to turn it over to Edwards, who does have some slides that we are going to share as well to talk through a little bit of the work that her office is doing to support students and young people going forward. So thanks for joining us.
So first of all, I would like to just really express my greatest gratitude to you, Delegate Brooke Learman. You've been a committed partner with the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success from day one, when we knew that the world was going to change. And you started reaching out, texting me, emailing me, and you got me on my toes really quick.
Committed partner is a very nice phrase.
Yes, and I appreciate that. And I also want to express my appreciation to the entire delegation, who has just done an amazing job of being a champion for Baltimore's children and Baltimore's families. And so I would like to step back in my comments today and talk about the opportunity that we have to relieve some of the stress that our school system is under. I really have great empathy for Dr. Santelisa's. She has an extraordinary job in an extraordinary time. And the only way that she and the commissioners and our children are going to be able to experience success this school year is if we all come together and rally around this opportunity that the challenge has presented to us. Next slide. So I want to step back a little bit from the school system and talk about another very important component of education for our children, and that's the child care industry. I serve on the Early Childhood Advisory Council for the City of Baltimore. I spend a lot of time talking with child care providers, talking with parents, and my office has been inundated with questions about what is the role that child care can play in supporting the educational needs of our children during the virtual learning environment. And what I want to kind of surface for the delegation is the importance of the child care industry to supporting children and supporting families. I also want to lift up that child care providers are primarily women, business owners, and in many cases, minority business owners. And so this is an industry nationally that has been under-resourced, that has not been valued and validated in early childhood education. And this is an opportunity for Maryland to get it right. This is an opportunity for Maryland to step up and support an industry of primarily women who support children, other people's children, and see them as a resource and an asset and infrastructure that can support the challenging dynamics that our school system is operating in and the pressures that our parents are experiencing. On this slide, I'm just highlighting for the delegation how fragile the child care industry is in the country, the state of Maryland, and Baltimore in particular. Many of our children prior to the pandemic did not have access to licensed quality child care. So we already had a deficit in the city and in, as I said, as the state as a whole. Then we get a pandemic who completely destroys the industry. Many child care providers are having to close. They're having to reduce their enrollment numbers. Parents are very skeptical about the child care industry, just like they are about schools. So you have varying levels of comfort. And many of these businesses are at a point today where they may have to shutter and they will never open again, which is problematic because we didn't have enough quality child care when we started. Next slide. So where are things now and what are parents and providers telling us? Again, thanking Delegate Brooke Learman, who was in the early stages of these conversations. We just said we needed to hear from parents and we needed to hear from providers directly in the city so that we could get a sense of what was happening on the ground. What was the need? What was the opportunity? Where could the city step in and provide direct support? We had a survey that was created by the University of Maryland School of Social Work and informed by our Early Childhood Advisory Council. Within a 5-day period, we had 655 parents respond to the survey and 321 child care providers. What was so surprising is that many parents told us that they did not know about the state's child care scholarship program. That is a critical resource, particularly for financially vulnerable families. They need to know that there is a state scholarship program available to them. If they are concerned about being able to pay for childcare, we have an underutilized resource that we need to direct every family to. Parents told us that they need childcare support, but they also need virtual learning support. They feel very ill-equipped to be able to support learning at home. And so they're really struggling with the going to work, staying home, keeping their children safe, and also being able to step in as teachers. So we have a lot of parents who feel very, very uncomfortable and very overwhelmed. Parents are also telling us that they can't afford childcare. They can't afford to create a parent learning pod. They can't afford a nanny. They're already struggling. Many of our families have lost income during the pandemic. We were already, as you know, a highly concentrated poverty jurisdiction. And so childcare has become another add-on expense. And they are experiencing lots of financial stress, childcare, food, the inability to pay their rent, utilities. So families are really, really struggling. Parents also told us that even if you gave them the laptop and even if they had the Wi-Fi, they need to be taught how to participate in a virtual learning environment. It's not intuitive to them, and they're really uncomfortable with taking on that responsibility. As I said, we also heard from child care centers, and what our child care providers are telling us is that enrollment is down. That's being driven by CDC and MSDE guidelines around reducing occupancy. Many parents, as I said, have reservations around sending their children into group settings. And parents, as I said, are saying they just cannot pay any portion of their income towards childcare because they're already strained. One of the other big challenges, and we're going to talk about this more, and we really need the delegation to help us with this, is that currently the state scholarship fund only pays for before or after care for school-age children. This is a wonderful opportunity for Maryland to step in and make the child care voucher program, the child care scholarship program for school-age children, eligible for any child care provider that is supporting virtual learning and to pay for full day instruction. And finally, many child care providers have told us that they are at risk of closing permanently if they do not receive direct cash assistance. Next slide. So I just thought it was really important to share with the delegation the types of emails that we are receiving on a regular basis. This is an actual email from a parent who has contacted Mayor Young, who is asking for help. This email says, "Good morning, my name is Shana, and I'm a single parent of an 8-year-old. My son attends public school in Baltimore. I'm writing this email because I'm a single working parent. I have 2 jobs. To get straight to the point, there's no way I can go to work and homeschool my 8-year-old son."
Oops, just you have about 1 minute left, just FYI.
Thank you. "And I cannot afford to pay anyone to do it. I just can't go to work. I just can't not go to work either. I have to have an income and my son also needs schooling. I've already used my FMLA for the closing of the last school year. There are many single parents like me that need to know what we can do so that we don't have to choose between working or our kids learning. I desperately need some help with this." Next slide. So finally, what can we do about this? Because it's very important that we be solutions oriented and we do have a path forward to support the competing priorities. First of all, we have to provide direct funding to our child care providers. Mayor Young sees this as a priority, and he is going to launch a child care assistance fund in the coming weeks where we are going to take a portion of our CARES Act dollars, provide grants to child care providers, but we need the delegation to have statewide response so that there's equitable resources for all children. Second, we need to drive parents to the state scholarship program. It's my understanding that there are lots of vouchers that are currently not being utilized. And so we should all work together to make sure that parents know about the voucher program and that the voucher program is expanded to cover school-age children who are in daycares.
15 seconds, please.
And thirdly, if we could partner with city schools, I know that Dr. Santelises is exploring a learning hubs concept for older children and for special needs students. This is something that we support 110% in the mayor's office. We intend to be a partner in that process. Our rec centers are open and available to also serve as learning hubs, and we are encouraging the school system to partner with child care providers to expand the capacity for more in-person learning hubs for children. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your presentation. There were a number of questions from the delegation. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, recognize, I'm going to say who had the question, then read it out loud. And the early ones are mostly for Dr. Santelises, I believe. But if other presenters have things that they would like to chime in with, please feel free. So Delegate Keith Haynes had the first question. What plans, if any, are being formed to reduce the risk of contracting COVID-19 going to and from schools using the MTA if the decision is made in the future to bring students into the classroom? A transit question right off the bat. Love it, Delegate Haynes. Thanks.
No, Delegate Lehrman knows because we have had many questions about transportation, Delegate Haynes. So you are not alone. And I will say that it is a challenge. It is still a challenge. And some of that, of course, required our partnership with MTA and some of their protocols. I think the biggest challenge, though, for us has been really a need for an increase in routes at a time when MTA, with understandable pressure with regards to funding and other things, is being pressured to decrease routes. So with regard to the sanitizing and that, they have their own protocols, and that's fine. That the place where we absolutely will have rub in any discussion about a full return to school is going to continue to be how we balance the pressures that MTA is experiencing with the pressures that young people and their families are. So I don't want to say we have a solution now to that. We have recognized it, but the biggest challenge really is flow and the need for social distancing when you have less routes than you would normally need. That's the biggest challenge right now. At least that's what I would say.
Great. Thank you for that. Delegate Rosenberg asked, are the arrangements that Baltimore City Public Schools has made for hotspots long-term or just for this academic year? And maybe it would be good to have you speak a little bit more extensively too on the hotspot and internet program. I know that there has been some work going, and we will, I think Chair Smith and Chair Hayes, Senator Washington, we are talking about holding another briefing as well on these digital issues. So, but Dr. Santelises, go ahead.
Sure. No, and just a credit again to the city delegation. Your advocacy around this area and this challenge has been early and consistent. We are also working with the city. I want to thank, and Ms. Edwards knows this, as many others do on the call, but just the early partnership with both the mayor as well as the city council around providing extra support and funds for that. And so that's brought us much further along than we were when we started in the spring. Where we sit right now is with regards to internet access in particular, is we have or will have a total of about 15,000 hotspots in total. We currently have 10 right now. We've distributed to date just over 4,000 of those hotspots to families, prioritizing families that do have real kind of challenging needs within the city for access to Wi-Fi. The other piece is got a chance with Councilman Cohen and some of the advocates this morning who have done a great job in really bringing attention to some of the challenges that families have, even with the Comcast Essentials package. So what we've done is we are working through agreements now. The governor, through his set aside of the state's care funds for internet and broadband access, Baltimore City is receiving a portion of that state funding. And so as a result, we will be able to use that fund, money from that fund, to actually, for lack of a better term, pay the Comcast bill to make sure that the 7,000 families that are currently on Comcast and that time is scheduled to end, that will enable us to carry those families through the end of the year. And so 7,000 families means anywhere from 14 to 20,000 Baltimore City students who will be able to carry. We also are looking at a real important issue, and that is just the speed of the broadband. As a mom of 3 and with a family of 5 and all of us on together, I know even for our household, our broadband that we thought was sufficient in February very quickly became insufficient as we all had to connect in a virtual setting. And this is true for so many of our families across the city. So we're also working and pressing for an increase of service and an increase of speed of access along with that. The other piece is that we still are working on long-term strategies through the mesh network and some work with the Digital Harbor Foundation. That's still in its nascent stages. So we have about 4 school neighborhoods, and the mesh network, for those members of the public or the delegation that might not know, is a way of leveraging increased broadband using actual physical school buildings to expand the reach of internet. But that's still, while incredibly hopeful, still in its smaller, earlier stages. And we also have some members of the private community that are helping us to think through some long-term possible solutions. I like to say we have an immediate need, which is September 8th, and making sure families can log on. And I think we are well on our way to that, which is a milestone in and of itself. But then there's the interim period that is, I would say, at minimum, the next 18 months, we are going to need families are going to be reliant minimally for 18 months on some form of virtual learning, be it full virtual, any kind of hybrid. Regardless, there's that interim period. And then there's, of course, the long-term issue that I think many of you have been working and advocating on, that we're just going to have to continue to lift. And it is this idea that we're living in an age and a time now where broadband really needs to be considered a utility. And in the same way that we committed as a country to making sure that every family had access to telephones, 100 years ago, we need to do the same thing with broadband now. And that's going to take a heavier lift. But that's where we are right now.
Thank you. Amen. Senator Washington, did you have something you want to hop in? You're on mute.
There we go. Every time I unmute myself. So the senators have a number of questions. I said this is our new format because normally we go back and forth, Senate, House. But I've got a number of questions. I guess, or just comments too. First of all, thank all the panelists and just the people that are working every day. You should know that your Senate and your House delegation has as our priority budget advocacy. And so one of the things that was recommended in the blueprint for the Maryland's future and the implementation of that blueprint was the sweeping reforms to our K through 12 education system, and especially why I'm raising it. This is especially in terms of childcare provisions. We had a vast expansion of public pre-K childcare programs, enhanced professional development for providers, creating new Judy centers. Unfortunately, our governor vetoed that bill, right? And so when we come back, we will, of course, be working to, override that piece of legislation. But I just, in the context of the conversation about childcare, one of the, and again, this is sort of a collaboration of all the comments from some of the senators, is that we were really gratified that we were able to see a $15 million as an additional federal funds allocated for childcare subsidies. So there has been additional money for childcare subsidies. It is not enough. We have to continue to fight going in the next direction, in the right direction. And so I just wanted to put that out there. But another question more broadly is that all of our surrounding jurisdictions seem to be saying that we should go at least to the end of the school year, this academic year. And so you don't have to, I guess, reply here, but there's the issues that were raised by Ms. Brown and by other parents about why we're doing this, and specifically how we're implementing it. For example, I have a question. How many of the schools currently have been cleaned according to the full CDC guidelines? Like, where are we right now? We just heard this kind of ambiguous 6 weeks, et cetera, but on September 8th, how many schools are actually going to be sanitized? And also given the fact that there are people that are coming in and out of the schools. So do you have an answer to that now, or is that something that?
No, well, I will say I think that there's some context that might be helpful. So first, with regard to full sanitizing of complete buildings for full use, yes, that would take 6 weeks if we were bringing all students and all teachers back. So I think that's really important context. That 6 weeks cleaning and sanitizing does not refer to the cleaning and sanitizing that's already occurred for the limited, and I have to emphasize, limited staff that's returning. So I think that's one piece. We have not talked about a full return back to school. That 6 weeks was what my team put together to let me know that whenever we are at a point where we are looking at a full, complete return to schools, that we need to give 6 weeks lead time to be able to do that. So I think that's important context to provide here. Secondly, with regards to the CDC guidelines, Senator, we actually have exceeded CDC guidelines. There's no requirement within CDC guidelines, for example, for there to be air purifiers. That's not within CDC guidelines, but we did that because of our care and concern for our staff. There is no CDC guidelines that talk about plexiglass in school offices. We are doing that because of the care and concern for even the 4 or 5 staff that are currently there. Now, yes, with regard to implementation, absolutely. When we have concerns that come in, and I'll give you an example related to PPE. When I was updated yesterday, we had 8 schools that had not picked up their PPE, and that was immediately flagged for both me as well as Chief Davis, but that is 8 schools out of 170 schools. There are other schools, and I too received emails, actually from people who were thankful that we followed through on the PPE, had the PPE there. And I think the public as well as teachers and our union partners, is right to say that before we have any full return to school, absolutely that will need to be in place, which is why I'm sure, and I know you know, on this call, when Senator Ferguson and Senate President Ferguson and Senator Pinsky had their forum last week, I was incredibly clear that unless we have full PPE for full return to school, not small groups, but full return for school, that needs to be in place. So I do think that that context is incredibly important when we're talking about, one, following CDC guidelines and at what stages we're ready to return. We had a very successful in-person summer school. No staff was compelled to participate. It was safe. There was PPE. We had positive feedback from parents. We took it slow, which is what we can intend to continue to do. So I do think that context when we discuss return is incredibly important so that we don't kind of spin around kind of what one thing is as opposed to what's going to need to be in place for a full return to school.
And the only reason I just have to follow up. The only reason I raised it is that the question was actually, I tried to summarize it, but the question was more about specifically around an October 16th decision about the hybrid plan. And
yes,
rather than just doing what all of our surrounding jurisdictions is saying, it's like, hey, let's take the whole fall semester to figure this out. So the question was, could you clarify why this is even an option, and what would be the contingency plan for these students should we decide to, based on whatever the decision is? So I was trying to summarize the question, but
sorry. No. I understand. So my apologies as well. So with regard to October 16th, one of the things that the board has been, and clearly Chair Chinya can speak to this as well, the board has been very clear that safety is the first priority. It does not, and when we set the October 16th deadline, it was not that we were definitely going to wait until October 16th, but that we were tracking the progress of the city. So that's first. So we absolutely have talked about, making a particular call at a particular time. That was giving ourselves the room to say, does it look feasible or does it not? But it doesn't mean we're absolutely announcing on October 16th per se. The second piece I would say is that what we're looking at now most seriously is what was successful this summer. And that is small groups of students for whom we know the virtual learning environment did not work. And what we heard from parents this summer was when they saw groups of 6 or 7 children in person with a teacher, that the staff felt more comfortable than, say, a full hybrid immediately, as well as families felt more comfortable. So we are taking that feedback and incorporating it. So just know that our focus right now is really on the small group piece, not on full hybrid, for exactly some of the reasons that you just stated and that numerous people have pointed out. So I think that's important.
Thank you.
Do you want me to ask a question, or do you want to do another Senate question since I did?
No, we caught up. That was 2.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. So let's see. Sorry, I'm scrolling down. Delegate Branch had a question. Delegate Chanel Branch, and where is it? What are the plans for providing resources for children with IEPs?
Great question. And I just gave a little tidbit in the chat. It's actually for a number of our students with IEPs that we spent the spring really evaluating with far more deliberation what are the supports that we actually can deliver virtually. And admittedly, in the spring, we really did a quick turnaround and frankly are doing far more work with really looking at what are some of the interventions, the supports that are listed in IEPs that young people deserve access to, and really focusing on some of those. So one, we'll have far more robust services we'll be able to provide virtually. And second, what I would say to that is we are prioritizing students with disabilities for any small group. And again, I just want to emphasize small group work, in person. And so some of the work we've been doing there, as Ms. Edwards referenced, Tisha, as she referenced, the work that we're really excited about with Rec and Parks would actually provide the kind of setting that if we know parents need support virtually for their young people in person because they have to work. And that email was incredibly powerful that you shared. And I have heard that over and over myself. So I can only imagine how much you're hearing it. What we're hoping is that in that partnership, we might actually even be able to identify some of our students with disabilities to then at the same time be able to get some of those services in small groups when they're in person. But it is a challenge. We have beefed up our ability to virtually provide service, but we are also working to make sure that that any students with IEPs would be prioritized for any in-person opportunities we have.
Sorry, you're still on mute, Mary.
I am great. So this question is from Ms. Edwards. Hi. We've been doing a lot of conversation about food, and we know that as the city's shut down its produce and canned food box operations around the city. Is this correct? I just want to check. I have a couple of follow-ups on that, but there's just some questions about the.
Right. So no, the city has. Right. So the city has not shut down its food and produce program, Senator Washington. We are shifting for a fall strategy. Remember when we stepped in at a time where city schools was not able to open and was not able to provide meals to children in the way that they would like to. Now we're shifting a little bit. It's my understanding that city schools is going to have 80 to 90 school buildings open for children to be able to receive food. We're moving into this partnership that Dr. Santelises and I referenced around learning hubs. We are going to continue to have some meals programs. We're going to really heavily rely on our community partners who've been amazing in the food distribution program. But the city is absolutely, completely committed to continuing to make sure that there's adequate meals and food boxes, but the players' roles are going to shift a little bit again as resources move, as opportunities present themselves. We're partnering with city schools, rec and parks in the community to shift the strategy over time. But we are completely committed to making sure that we continue to feed Baltimore.
Absolutely. And this was an opportunity for rumor control. So that's, I wanted you to be able to say that, and that you're relying on school sites to feed our young people. And so you're going to provide these meals during school hours, or what about students who live too far? I mean, and also the CEO can jump in on this as well, but there's just a number of questions senators had just around food distribution and what the planning looks like for that. Is there a plan coming forward?
There's absolutely a plan. And we are coordinating it. Sonia and I have a team that works separately on the food strategy. We're closing out the summer program. Supper meals are going to be available in many of our community-based sites. So there is a plan. We're hoping to be able to publicize that, but it's a coordinated effort. Sure. And so what we're always trying to do is bring the school system's resources plus the city plus the community. But yes, there is a plan, and we're hoping that we'll be able to announce that prior to the opening of school, but definitely before the summer meals programs end.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Back to you, Delegate Lehrman.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Tony Bridges had a couple questions. Delegate Bridges had a couple questions. And the first was, is there a need to bring in extra virtual tutoring support options, either internally or through any outside organizations? And a great question about immunizations. I just had a principal call me yesterday about this because they are an issue. Have immunizations become an issue due to restrictions that were in place from COVID? Will families be able to make the deadline for immunizations, and how could that impact enrollment? Thank you.
Let's see, the first question, let me remember. Because I did.
It was about tutoring.
Tutoring. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I know I started a little bit in the chat to respond to that. We do have a heavy focus on tutoring because, you know, one of the things that we know is that tutoring is a really powerful lever for accelerating student learning. That is kind of established within the literature and the research. So we did have some support, again, from a state allotment. Some of the challenge with that, it was the quick turnaround in which the money had to be spent. And I'm sure you all know that, you know, when you get lots of money, but you have to turn it around quickly, you don't get to be as kind of focused and creative with it as you would like. But we definitely are. We are expanding our virtual tutoring. So some of our local reading partners are expanding some of their spots. We also have our curriculum partner Amplify in early reading, who is expanding their virtual tutoring. So we're trying to build out virtual tutoring. The other piece is that we are working with a lot of Black membership organizations in the city to also help leverage the community and civic resources around tutoring. One of the challenges is going to continue to be the coordination of all of those efforts. Tina Hike-Hubbard, our chief of family and community engagement and communication, her team has been doing a really great lift on that. But we're also looking for ways, for example, we had a very successful Baltimore City teacher led SAT over the summer that was incredibly successful. And what was powerful about that is that it was actually some of our best teachers who were tutoring in SAT prep. It's unfortunate the first two administrations have been canceled, but we saw actual gains in students. So part of what we're doing is trying to leverage some local tutoring with virtual tutoring. Our Amplify partner we're going to be able to have 2,000 families access that virtual tutoring in early literacy, but it's absolutely an area. So I'm glad you asked about it. And then the second one, I'm sorry, my brain lately. Which one?
Immunizations. Oh. This is a real issue. I know I've had principals reach out about their concerns.
Immunizations matter. That's all I can say. Directed from the state, you got to have them. If it makes anybody feel better, my poor husband had to drag our girls to finish theirs yesterday because there's no pass for the CEO's kids either. So we absolutely have to have them immunized. The good news is because of a lot of the community effort, we're actually now not too bad. Like we're actually kind of on track. When I checked yesterday, the challenge, as we all know, is really going to come in the next few weeks. And so, you know, Baltimore City Health continues to be a wonderful partner in this. Also, the Rail Center at KIPP, which is usually only for KIPP students, has opened up citywide so families can go there. So one of the things that would be great for the delegation to do is if you could just get the information out to families about where they can be immunized, how they can access and push it from your end. It would be really great to keep that momentum going. And like I said, Delegate Lehrman, it is real. You do have to have it. My children have to be immunized too. So it's.
Thank you. Senator Washington.
I guess we maybe in a report over the summer or somehow there was this number put out there that towards the end of school, leading up to the June ending, approximately 20 or 30% of students hadn't logged on. And so I know you were using your summer as a model for how we're going to do better, I guess, in the fall. So are there still some missing children or no connections that have been made? Has this changed? Is it still an issue? And would be for the CEO. And this is some of my conversations with principals about just some of their students never logged in.
No, absolutely. And I think we had two measures. So we had a measure that was contact measure because we had a number of teachers, principals. We actually had support from the city, a number of our city partners who, for lack of a better way to describe it, went and helped us find kids and find families. And so our percentage of students that we actually made contact with was much higher than the 20 to 30%. The challenge was absolutely in the connectivity and the logging on for class, right? You can, we have creative young people, right? So you can only go so long trying to follow a math class on your cell phone. That just is not going to be sufficient, right, for a learning environment. So I feel as if we have made great progress in actually ordering devices for our young people, getting those to families. I can't stress enough that please get the word out that any family that needs a device, and if you only have one and you have 3 children, you still should come in for a device. So that's one. And two, all of the work we've been doing with the connectivity plays a role. But I think we also have discussed with school leaders the need for tighter protocols and expectations around touch points between caring adults and students. We have heard overwhelmingly continue every group of students I talked to, whether it was March, April, or last week, says the same thing. When people check in, when I know I can get a teacher to return my email or a principal to check in on me or a counselor to, connect with me, I'm more likely to feel like I'm still part of school. So I think that's the other piece of work we've been doing is getting our data systems ready for far tighter monitoring, as well as just the human, I know it feels weird to say human touch in this environment where we're supposed to be social distancing, but the human contact matters. And so we've really been emphasizing the relationship building as well. So
great, thank you.
We'll have better data this fall.
Good.
Thank you. I think this is going to be the last question from delegates because it's 6:20 and I don't know that we'll get to the Facebook questions, but I think instead what we'll do is we will collect them and send them to our presenters and then get some written feedback on those questions and post the answers that we receive on the Facebook post. I think that's maybe the best way to handle some of those Facebook questions so we don't go too late. But question from Delegate Wells to Dr. Santelises is, can you elaborate on how the in-person instruction will be implemented citywide? Would students be meeting at their existing schools or traveling to a new location? I'm especially interested in how this is implemented in schools and communities that have concentrated of students who will benefit from in-person instruction.
That is a great question, Delegate Wells, and I wish that I had some kind of rolled out detailed plan because your questions are spot on. What I would say right now is that we are prioritizing families that have had students that have had more challenging time connecting for the learning hubs that Ms. Edwards and I have been, Tisha and I have been referencing this entire time. So that's one thing. Two, I will emphasize that we're not kind of starting with a mandate that every single school is going to have in person. This is still optional for staff, our staff that worked This summer, it was optional. So to be able to say every single school is going to have small group in person by X date, we are just not in the place to do that right now. But what I can tell you is, you know, and I think it says something about a lot of the members of our team, is that what we found is a lot of the communities, a lot of the school communities that were expressing the most interest in some of this small group were those who knew that their young people were not connecting, who knew that their students with disabilities just were not being served well virtually. And again, it's not, nobody is being, you know, directed to say you must come back to teach in a small group. We're not doing that. But I will say what we are tracking very closely is, again, who are the students, who are the families that are most vulnerable during this virtual space, and how do we make sure that we're prioritizing their ease to be able to get there. But we're not in a place that I can guarantee that that kind of service will be accessible at every school or at a student's home school. We're working towards it, but we're also trying to make sure, for reasons we talked about earlier, that we're doing it safely. But your questions are spot on.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to, I think, unless there are more senators' questions, we can turn it back over to the chairs, but I'll defer to you.
No, we're good. Just a final comment, because I know Delegate Lehrman and I asked the Maryland Out of School Time Network to be on here for reference, and so we didn't really direct any questions to Ellie Mitchell, but just to put out there that we know and ensure that our out of school time partners are going to be working hard to do whatever they can to leverage their partnerships, as is in the question. So I'm just assuming that we are. I see you're nodding, and so that's my point.
Yeah, thank you for that. And also a huge shout out to all our community school coordinators. They've been invaluable partners throughout all of this. And I just think that the pandemic has highlighted even more the need for community schools in every single community. So shout out to all of them lifting up their work. And now delighted to turn it back over to our chairs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delegate Lehrman, and I apologize for not making it clear that people understood that she's the chair of the Education Committee for the House Delegation. So she did a fantastic job pulling this together. You don't have to give me the no. I just want to make sure you know I'm thankful for the hard work. Also, I just want to, before I turn it over to Senator Hayes, it's just lift up that this is a really tough time. Right? It's just a tough time for a lot of people. And I just want to say that I am appreciative of every single panelist, from you know, the schools to the teachers to the support staff to the board to the mayor's office. There are pieces of the puzzle. We need every piece of the puzzle. And we're so appreciative of the work. You know, there are sleepless nights. We know there are concerns, you're going to make mistakes. And I'm just going to be real. We're all going to make mistakes. We have no roadmap for what we're experiencing right now. So I definitely want to let you know that I appreciate the effort, the commitment to our young people. And, you know, as Delegate Lehrman mentioned, you know, the conversation around digital access, it's really getting a lot of focus in the context of K through 12 education, but it's way bigger than that, as Dr. Santalisi alluded to, because your ability to fully participate in this life here in America is almost not possible if you don't have access. So that's how we felt that we couldn't avoid obviously discussing it within the context of, you know, going back to school, but we felt like it was worth a broader conversation, you know, moving forward, because I don't want to leave out our friends in higher ed. There are young people trying to make their way at BCCC that maybe are living in the same, you know, digital deserts that our young people are, right? And they're going to have a hard time trying to get the skills they're trying to develop to compete in the 21st century economy as well. And even the emerging sectors to respond to COVID-19, we're telling people to sign up to be a contact tracer, and that course is provided online. So, you know, that these are real gaps to your ability to live a full and productive life. And I want to echo, I know Dr. Stanley's and I have had this conversation, and Delegate Lehrman, a bunch of us, that I can't speak for anyone else, but I personally feel very strongly that we need to work towards this being viewed as a public utility and take the necessary steps to make that happen. Because through all of these challenges and paradigms that are shifting, if we continue just to think patch jobs are sufficient for our children and for our country, then we have learned nothing, you know. So I'm really optimistic that we'll do what we have to do to get through this like season, but we really need to think bigger, and our kids and our communities deserve bigger solutions so that we're not always basically right back here at square one every 6 to 18 months. So I just want to thank you all for the work that you're doing. I'll be real, I am not looking forward to the virtual learning. I know that education is not the ministry that God has established for my life. And I learned that quickly in March when I became a fake teacher's assistant. So I am just really thankful for all that you do. And Senator Hayes, off to you.
Yeah, I echo the words that Delegate Smith has shared with us. Thank you for all of the presenters. Thank you for Senator Washington and Delegate Lehrman, who did an extraordinary job at moderating tonight's conversation. Senator Washington serves us well as the only member of Baltimore City that serves on the EHE committee that deals with these education issues, and so her representation and words tonight was definitely appreciated. And I just want to thank everybody. But lastly, remind everyone to please complete the census. Please complete the census. Make sure that every young person and family in Baltimore is counted. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.